that ever since Instagram made the announcement that they are no longer a photo sharing platform and that there is a lot greater emphasis on video content, I thought this is the moment, this is when I need to update my portfolio. Because truth be told, about half the work I've done for clients over the years has been video content, but my portfolio has never reflected that. I've just never taken the time and effort to invest in it, but now is the moment, now is the time. So I've been doing some updates to my portfolio, creating some new work. So this little video right here, I created for my portfolio, and I'm gonna walk you through the behind the scenes so you can see how I set this up and executed it, as well as share with you 3 important things that you wanna keep in mind to really take that stop motion animation to the next level. What's shaking bacon? I'm Joni Simon. Welcome to my studio. This is where I do food photography and videography. And the goal here is to improve your food photography skills so you can feel more confident behind the camera. Like I said, I've been working on my portfolio, making some updates to it. I'm actually like redesigning the whole site. So it's under construction. You can't see it yet, but I'll be sure to share that out in a couple weeks. And if you want me to kind of walk through some of the reasons that I did different things on that site, happy to share that in an upcoming video. But like I said, I'm really putting a lot more video content in motion into the portfolio itself. And one of my favorite kinds of videos to create are stop motion animations, especially these short, little, fun, poppy, energetic, playful stop motion animations. I feel like this is such a creative medium, and I'm always uncovering new and different ways to create something that's really eye-catching. But despite looking kind of fairly simple, these can actually be pretty complex if you've ever attempted stop motion and been like, oh gosh, this was a lot more than I was bargaining for. But there's some fairly simple things that you can do to pay attention to help take those stop motion animations to the next level. But before we get into that, I am excited to share with you that today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. Explore new skills, develop existing interests, and get lost in creativity. It's curated specifically for learning, meaning there are no ads and they're always launching new premium classes so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. Now, I recently loved watching Video for Instagram, very relevant to today's video, telling an engaging story in less than a minute with Halis Narvaez, a digital storyteller and video producer. Now, I love that she gets at the heart of what makes video content great. It's the story and how to cultivate that visually with things like framing and cinematography, but also tangible editing tools and methods, and in a way that you can do it without needing any fancy gear. All you need is a phone to bring someone into the story that you want to tell. And when you join, you can try one of Skillshare's live classes. Experience real-time inspiration as you connect with popular teachers while watching and working along with other members. So whether you're a dabbler or a pro, a hobbyist or a master, you're creative. Discover what you can make with classes for every skill level. And the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare so you can start exploring your creativity today. So thank you again so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now let's play with the animation. So first and foremost, let's just like walk through what I'm shooting, what gear I'm using, all the setup. So today I'm shooting these flapjacked mighty muffins, which are fun little protein packed muffins, and it's the s'mores flavor. I thought it'd be really fun to incorporate graham crackers and chocolate and marshmallows and kind of have that all dancing around the scene. I always think that's a really fun thing to add into like these product videos, is those flavor cues. And then in terms of the background, you know, I was looking at the packaging and there's this very apparent blue. And then I know I also have like those warmer like yellows and oranges that are in the graham crackers. So I thought what would be like the perfect contrast to all of that to tie it all together would be a nice blue background. So this is one that I've made myself. I actually created this for a cookbook shoot that I did last year, but I use it time and time again. I use my DIY backdrops method. So if you've missed that video, I will link it below. And then for anybody who's been around this channel, you already know the drill as far as mounting that camera overhead on the C-stand. Video also linked down below, and then using the spirit level to make sure that the camera is perfectly level. Super duper helpful in these situations where we just want to make sure that overhead view, that we don't have any geometry issues in post. Now in terms of the softwares that I'm using, when I shoot stop motion specifically, when it comes to the tethered capture component, y'all know I love shooting tethered, and usually I shoot into Capture One. Lightroom's great too, Canon EOS app, like there's lots of different ways to tether, but when I'm doing stop motion, Dragon frame is what I use because it's got a couple little extra nifty features. I'll do another video coming up soon that kind of dives deeper into Dragon Frame so you can see some of the specifics of why I love that software. But if you're looking to do a lot of stop motion animation, I'm just going to encourage you to go download that free trial of Dragon Frame, play around with it, play with the onion skin feature. Again, this is like teaser for future video, but it definitely makes certain things about doing stop motion just a little bit easier. And then after I've captured all of the images that are going into the stop motion, I'll do all of the image editing in Lightroom. You could also use Capture One or whatever you use to edit your photos. And then in terms of piecing the video all together, I use Adobe Premiere, but a lot of folks will make GIFs and other things like that over in Photoshop. So that's all kind of to each their own. Like anything in photography and videography, there's many ways to get one thing done. That's just my own personal process. But super duper important, something I do before every stop motion I do, even if it's a super short one like this, where it's like less than 10 seconds, I will still sketch out a storyboard and like an order of events so that I know as I am capturing all the different images, setting up the different scenes and different actions, that I know what comes next. It just really helps to simplify things. And I feel like I come up with some more creative ideas there by really visualizing what's this video gonna look like when it's done. So then moving on into what I'm sure is the next question on your mind is, what about the lighting? And this is actually leading into now tip number one. That's something that can really take your stop motion animation to the next level and really take it to that more professional level, is having really consistent lighting from the very first frame to the last frame and everything in between, that the lighting stays consistent, that it's not changing, that we're not getting some frames that are brighter, some frames that are darker, that it's really continuous. Because as we play through, right, you think about what is stop motion. Well, it's taking a picture and then you slightly move something, you take another picture, slightly move it again, and so on and so forth over the course of 100, 200, 1,000 frames. Put those all together in a timeline and play them through. It's going to animate those different subjects and any changes from frame to frame. Well, what happens is if the lighting changes from frame to frame, it looks like a flicker, right? Because those frames are playing so quickly through. So in order to minimize that and again create a really seamless, cohesive look throughout all of the video, is to ensure that we have consistent lighting. So how we get that consistent lighting, the easiest and most effective way to do that is with artificial lighting. Now what you'll probably notice here and maybe be thinking, well, what's going on here? Joni loves her strobes, but today I'm shooting with continuous lighting. I am shooting with the Aperture 300D, which is a continuous LED light. And the reason that I use LEDs is because they are a bit more consistent in terms of the lighting in comparison to a strobe. Now I love my strobes, shooting stills, like, I mean, I love them so much. However, unless you're working with really high-end lights or lights that are specifically geared for that consistency factor, there may be some variation from flash to flash, that it just might be a slight difference in terms of that brightness factor. So if I were to shoot all of this on a strobe, there may be just a little bit of flicker because there is a little bit of inconsistency. Now, if you're working with some like top quality lights or, you know, something that's specifically engineered for that, you're gonna have a bit more luck in that department. But for me, the LEDs, that they are really consistent, they're not changing from frame to frame. So it really helps to ensure that consistency factor. And in terms of the modifier that I've opted for here today, this is a 150 centimeter octagon softbox. Really nice, soft wraparound light in this situation, which I felt like would be really flattering for the scene. Now we could certainly get super creative with the lighting and stop motion animation. That kind of leverages a whole other set of creative opportunities. You could go hard light or really dramatic shadows, or bust out a cucaloris for some shadow play. I mean, really, again, feel free to think outside the box when we get into stop motion animation. But I was going for something more classic, really showing off the colors and just something super playful. So that soft lighting to me was very fitting for this scene. Now, one other little footnote that I want to make sure to mention is that when we're doing these kinds of videos is thinking about where's the final destination of this video. In this situation, I wanted to create one of these short little 10-second guys that could go inside of an Instagram feed. So thinking about that 4:5 aspect ratio and wanting something that's vertically oriented. So I have got my camera set up in such a way that it's capturing the images vertically. But if we wanted to, of course, capture this for some other platform where we're putting it horizontally or we're putting it on a banner on a website. I mean, just again, always thinking about what's the final destination of this piece and how do I need to orient the camera in order to capture that. So going back to that idea of consistency, really creating a consistent look from frame to frame. Tip number 2 is to really dial in and lock in your white balance. Something that can cause a lot of problems for stop motion animation is if you are used to shooting in auto white balance. Because even if we're working with an artificial light source, which good news, the artificial light source is not going to change in color temperature. It's going to set it what it's set at. And so it's going to stay that way for the entire shoot. But if there's some sort of like little changes in the environment or something that tips the camera off to think, oh, I should just make a little adjustment here in terms of white balance, that then if that white balance is changing at all from frame to frame, it's really going to be visible then in those final images. So really save yourself a lot of headache and heartache, because I have been there. I have shot stop motion in auto white balance and I'm like, oh, this one's a little too warm, this one's a little too cool, and Lord have mercy trying to color correct, you know, 400 different images. Like, forget it. Like, let's just reshoot the whole thing. So for me here today, working with the Aperture 300D and then my Nikon Z7, I found that the 5000 Kelvin temperature was like the perfect white balance setting for this combination of camera and this light. It does say that it's a 5600 Kelvin light, but you know, there's always some sort of variation. So whatever light that you're shooting with, you're gonna wanna take some time to really experiment with it to make sure that that white balance really is dialed in. And so that specific Kelvin setting and locking it in there so that I know that no matter what I'm doing, that I'm gonna have that consistency. Now, one thing I'm also doing here as well is I am shooting in RAW, so that even if in Lightroom, when I get into post and I go into editing the photo, if I do wanna alter that white balance at all in post, I can. But again, because it's locked in at a specific color temperature for the entirety of the shoot, if I end up changing one of the photos and then I copy and paste those edits across all the images, then they'll all sync and it'll all still be the same. And so then tip number 3 to really help to ensure that consistency factor, to help support that consistent white balance and help to support the consistent exposure, particularly in this situation, working with a continuous light source, is we really want to make sure to lock down and control our environmental light, that we don't want light coming into the scene from other places, particularly natural light, because natural light loves to change, right? That even if you have a window that's like across the room, but if that light is coming in and then all of a sudden there's like a cloud outside, it's going to affect that scene, even if we're primarily lighting with our continuous light sources. Any sort of changes in the environment are going to be picked up on in the scene. So for me here in the studio, that means pulling down the blinds, that means closing the curtains. I also kind of took the additional measure of putting up this large V-flat. Now you'll see that I opted to have the white side of the V-flat pointing the scene, and that was so that I could get some additional fill light on the scene, so that the light is coming in from my primary light source, bouncing off that white V-flat and just kind of filling in the shadows a little bit. But if you wanted to go for something darker or moodier, we could certainly use the dark side. But by helping to just block any additional light that's coming from that nearby window, it's again really helping to bolster the consistency from shot to shot. So now along those same lines, and a tip I have not brought up in a long time, like this was one of the very first videos I made on the channel, is to also be conscientious about what you're wearing and how physically close you are to the scene, because you may be reflected in the packaging or reflecting color or light. So again, making sure from a consistency factor, like if you're wearing white and you stand closer to the scene and you take a shot, and then you move further away from the scene and you take a shot, like that's gonna also impact then the fill light that's coming in the scene, and there's gonna be inconsistency. And for people like me with super pale arms, right? Like this may cause reflections. So I'm always very conscientious to make sure that I'm consistently like the same distance from the scene when I fire the shutter. And if you're wondering how I'm firing the shutter, well, what I do is when I am shooting tethered into Dragon Frame, like I am here today, they have a really nifty little controller that you can buy from Dragon Frame to control the shutter and to control some other functions and things like that. For me, I just have my wireless keyboard from the computer, and if you hit the enter key, that fires the shutter. And then actually one more little bonus tip while we're talking about the idea of consistency then is we want to make sure too that we're not moving the camera, that we're not bumping the camera. Oh, have mercy. There have been so many times that I'm like near the end of a scene and then I just like accidentally bump the surface, or I bump the camera, and then all of a sudden what that's going to look like in that final image is like there's just going to be this little like jump, right? Because now the scene has shifted. So really being very careful and mindful, like not wearing a baseball ball cap, I've done that, especially when shooting with the camera mounted overhead, you know, ball cap on, and all of a sudden the bill of the ball cap hits the camera, and then the camera's bumped and it's moved, and that's gonna look like a little jump in that final stop motion. So making sure the camera's not moving, the surface is not moving, anything that we don't wanna move in that final video, we want to make sure is locked down and we don't bump anything. So take your time, feel free to be slow. This is one of those things, like, stop motion is not something to rush through. So don't try to just like power through it. Really take your time, be methodical, do it the right way first time. But then once you've got everything in place, you've got everything locked down, you know your plan, you know where you're going, then it's just a matter of taking one frame at a time. And I know that kind of seems monotonous, but there's something, again, that's very enjoyable to me about that process. Maybe you enjoy it too. If you've ever created a stop motion and you love it as well, feel free to share that in the comments below. Or if you're looking to create your first stop motion and you're gonna go do that next, let us know that too. We wanna root you on. But as always, it is such a treat to have you here in the studio. Thank you so much for stopping by. Hope you have a fantastic day. Hope you stay out of trouble, and I'll see you soon, all right? Bye.